Hey everybody, I'm Chef AJ and welcome to Healthy Living. My guest today is Suzanne Smith. Suzanne is a nurse practitioner at the UCLA Center for Neurobiology of Stress and Resilience in the Department of Digestive Disease at the David Geffen School of Medicine. That is a mouthful. Her passion is bringing the brain back into medicine by bringing complementary mind-body-based therapies such as mindfulness to allow healing from within. I love that you're bringing the brain back. It sounds like, I think of that song, We're Bringing Booty Back. You're bringing the brain back. So thank you, Suzanne, so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Actually, bringing the brain back into medicine is what Dr. Meyer, who's the director of our center here, is trying to do. So that's why I use that terminology.
Right. Well, I recently interviewed him. He has a wonderful new book. And let me just tell everybody how I know Suzanne, because I know her, but I've never actually interviewed her. So last May, I was sent to a wonderful 8-week mindfulness class at UCLA that Suzanne was the facilitator. And I was sent there by my gastroenterologist as one of the therapies or treatments for IBS. And you just blew my mind. That was such a great class, and I thought it would be nice to tell the viewers a little bit more about just what mindfulness is and how it's helpful, not necessarily just for IBS, but just for life, because I'm sure a lot of people think of mindfulness as just sitting around contemplating your navel, not really, because it seems like doing nothing. And somebody like me that's very anxious and very high energy, it's sort of the opposite of the way I'm wired, and that's why I need it, and it always seems to be the hardest thing to do. I eat right, I exercise, but man, the mindfulness and the meditation, it's like, ugh. So first of all, what is it and why is it important?
Okay. Well, I like to think of it as it's basically paying attention with intention. Okay, so you're actually making an intention to pay attention and be aware. And one definition that I specifically like is one from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is the person who designed the 8-week MBSR course to bring into clinics and hospitals back in the 80s. And he says that mindfulness is paying attention on purpose to our moment-by-moment experience non-judgmentally.
That's hard.
Okay? Yeah. It's very hard.
I think it's hard in two ways. The paying attention is hard, but the non-judgmental part is hard. But I'm going to tell you something right now, and I hope you don't mind sharing this. You shared a story about judgment. I don't want to say what the story is, a veteran. And that story changed my life. And, I feel like if you take a course or read a book or even see a movie, and even if there's one sentence that could help you, it was worth it. And first of all, the whole course was worth it. But when you shared that story, it was like, I can't even tell that story without crying, but you tell it so beautifully. And I've told that story in my classes. I teach cooking, by the way, so I'm not teaching mindfulness. And there was a rabbi in the class, and she said, everybody was crying. She goes, I'm going to use that in sermon tomorrow. So would you mind, because it was such a profound story, and it really just made such a difference in my life when I am impatient now, when people cut me off in traffic. I think of that story, and I'm like, so please tell it, because that's going to change everybody's life, that story.
Yeah, I first heard that story actually at a meditation retreat, and it had a really strong impact on me as well. So, the story goes that there's a veteran who has returned home. And as we all know, it's very difficult being away at war doing these things all the time. And so when he came back, he had a little bit of what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. And so he was working with someone, and he was learning how to breathe and do some meditation. So he was slowly learning these skills. And one of the things is that you go and do a little bit of exposure. So he thought, okay, I'm going to try to go out to the grocery store just to get a couple items and see how that goes. And so, and I also might be changing some of the details, but this is just how I remember it.
Right.
So he's in the grocery store, and he picked a time of day where it's not too busy just because, you know, the overstimulation makes him feel some anxiety rising up in his body. So he's in the store, and he gets maybe 3 or 4 items, and he decides to go to the quick check, and he's standing in line at the quick check, and there's like maybe 3 people in front of him. But, you know, he thinks, yeah, you know, I'm handling this so far. This is really great. And then the next person goes through, and then the next person goes through, and he's like, I'm almost up there. I'm almost up there. And he's, you know, he's standing there, and he's kind of starting to feel a little bit of more anxiety rushing up. And the person that's at the check stand now just has a pack of gum. And he kind of starts thinking, you know, why is someone coming into a store just to buy a pack of gum? And the person's carrying a baby. And the cashier and the customer are going back and forth, and they're starting to engage in some conversation. And he's not really listening, but he's kind of wondering what's happening here. This is you know, this is unnecessary. This is a quick check line, and that's, you know, meant to move quickly. And he's starting to get more and more agitated, and then all of a sudden the customer hands the baby to the cashier. And the cashier is like, you know, bouncing the baby up and down, and he's really starting to get upset now. He's like, what is happening here? This is ridiculous. I need to get out of the store. And he kind of remembers, like, the skill set, like, okay, you know, take a couple deep breaths, deep breaths, and then the cashier hands the baby back to the customer, and then they finish up the transaction and they move along. And so he gets up to the cashier, and he says, you know, he's kind of still feeling anxiety, but he's just like, cute baby. And she says, oh, really? He is cute, isn't he? You know, my husband was over in Iraq, and he was killed. And that's my mother, and that's my baby. And she comes in about once a day to bring him in so I can hold him. And anyhow, so he, you know, he makes it out of the store, but the point of the story is, you know, we're always so quick to make judgments and tell stories about things, and we really don't know the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it 100 times now, and it still gets me, because it's just, there's an old saying, you know, I think it's an Indian saying, don't judge a man until you've walked a mile in his moccasins, you know. But it's so hard, but that story helps me so much. And it even has helped me in the check stand when things were not moving quickly. And I remember that story, and it doesn't mean that I don't get upset and anxious, but I don't judge, because I don't know, you know, I don't know. When somebody cuts me off in traffic now, I say to myself, their dog died today. Or, I mean, you know, maybe. I don't want to just assume that people are assholes anymore. And that really helps. So the judgment part, but when you talk about paying attention, I mean, if your life totally sucks, why would you want to pay attention? You know, I run a program for food addiction, and people are using food as other people use drugs and alcohol, to medicate and to not deal with what's going on. So how can mindfulness help when you just don't like your life?
Well, actually, I'd like to go back to that story, because that story also can go for our own mind. You know, it crosses over into the way that we tell stories about ourselves, and the way that we tell stories about situations in our lives. And sometimes we often get lost in that story or that narrative when it's really actually not that way. And so one thing that the paying attention can do, I mean, there's different, you know, first of all, it opens you up to your life. And yeah, you're saying, well, maybe you don't enjoy your life, right?
Well, I mean, I do, but I know a lot of people that don't.
And there are people, you, whoever's listening, maybe somebody really has a really tough life, you know, and many people do. Many people struggle. But there's so much beauty in life as well. I mean, just the trees, the flowers, somebody's smile.
The painting behind you.
Yeah, I mean, the laugh of a child, We miss so much of our life because we are lost in this narrative that's going around in our mind, or we're so focused on, either thinking about the past or figuring out what we're going to do, in the present, that we're actually not awake and aware for our lives. And so, yes, someone might feel like, I have a really tough time right now. But the other thing that mindfulness does is when you're actually meditating, when you sit and you spend time and you can sit still and you can watch your mind and you focus on the breath, and then the attention, your mind wanders because everybody's mind does that. It's natural. And then you come back and then your mind wanders and you come back. And what happens is we actually build, neural pathways that way. And the other thing that we build is the capacity to be with things that are uncomfortable or difficult in our own minds. And so over time, that helps you build a capacity to be with other difficult things in your life. And it can also open you up to the other side, the beauty and the joy of life, because there's always difficulty and there's always beauty and joy. But sometimes, and usually, we tend to focus on the negative things. Right. And actually, that is a biological mechanism. We do have, neuroscientists have found that we do have a negativity bias.
Wow, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so the negative things actually stick to our brain like Velcro. And pleasant things actually slip off like Teflon. So we don't actually remember pleasant things as much. I think it takes about 15 to 30 seconds to register a pleasant thing.
That is...
Where negativity is like that.
That's so interesting because I just got done producing a conference with about 300 people. It was wonderful. And I got like 298 compliments and 2 negative remarks. And that's all I'm thinking about all day are these 2 negative remarks. I'm forgetting about the 298 positive pieces of feedback and I'm focusing on that. That's so interesting that there is a bias. I didn't know that. So now I won't judge myself so harshly for going to that. Because now I know there's a bias.
Yeah, well, that's what we do, right? We remember the one thing, and that actually serves us biologically, right? Because if you do remember the negative thing, you're going to remember it later.
It's like your hand on a hot stove. You want to remember that because you don't want to touch it again.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Our ancestors were the people who paid attention to the negative things, right. Or we wouldn't be here.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So I know that mindfulness and meditation are not the same thing. I'm guessing they're complementary, but can you have one without the other? Because to try to get people to sit still and meditate seems almost impossible. But a lot of the stuff that you taught in your class almost seems doable because, like just going for a walk. What I learned from your class is that I was mindful at how mindless I was. And so what I started doing is like when I was walking my dog Bailey was instead of just being on my phone, which is usually what I'm doing, is I didn't do that. I don't say I don't, I do that sometimes, but while I was in your class, and then I'd notice like a hummingbird, which I wouldn't have seen if I was on my phone. And so I started paying attention, but to do it full time, it's like we're so busy. How do we have time for mindfulness?
Well, there's something, so there is the formal practice, which is the meditation, right, where you sit, and it doesn't have to be sitting. If someone's more active, you can do walking meditation.
Yeah, we did that in the class. I like that.
Yeah. Feeling your feet on the ground. So basically just staying with the sensations in the body, right? So you're present and you're aware. And, obviously you're not going to have your eyes closed when you're walking. Right. So you're going to, you're aware of what's going on, but you're staying in the present moment. So when we bring our attention to our breath and our body, that accesses us to the present. That's going on right now. Okay? So there is a formal practice of walking or sitting, and the reason you do that is to build this, like I said earlier, the capacity, right? Mm-hmm. And to build the attention networks and things that in the brain. But there's also the informal practices, and those can be practiced at any moment. Okay, so when you realize that you're lost in thought, or lost in maybe an emotion or something, someone says something to you and you feel angry, you can bring yourself back. That's why everybody says take a breath, right? Or breathe, because that brings us back to the present moment. And right there, you're practicing mindfulness. There's just being aware of what's happening in your body. The other reason that we sit and we pay attention for, in a formal way, is to kind of get to know, well, what do these things feel like in the body? So when I am angry, what does that feel like? So we're more aware of those cues when they're coming up, and we're not so reactive, right? So when we're angry, we're not just yelling at someone, and then, you can't take that back, right? You feel it coming up in your body, you know what it feels like, and then you have that little bit of time to actually, that little space where you can actually respond instead of react. So that's the other thing mindfulness helps with is reactivity. But yes, you can, there's so many informal practices, paying attention to pleasant things like we did in the class. Noticing, like you said, when you're out on a walk.
Yeah. How did you get into mindfulness? Because I love your voice. You seem like a very, very calm person. Were you always this way?
I've always been a pretty calm person. Yes, I get anxious and angry, just like any other human being. But I have always kind of had a calm and soft demeanor, yes. But how I actually... I was introduced to it. I used to work in San Francisco in the pediatric intensive care unit. And I had been taking care of a patient for 3 months, and a boy. And I was very close with his family. And, he died. And I was very sad. And my mentor nurse, said, I want to take you somewhere. And I had no idea where she was taking me. And there's a meditation center in the hills of Marin. It's called Spirit Rock. And so we went there. On Monday nights, they have group meditation. And so we went there and we walked around. And I mean, this place is beautiful. It's just nature. And then, I went to the meditation group. And so I really enjoyed it. It really kind of gave me a feeling of feeling centered, right? Feeling, because I really didn't feel that way. I was really grieving. And, I really felt it helped me. And so, I would go back there periodically. But I didn't actually start a practice then. I really didn't have any guidance, I think what happens with meditation is people think that you're going to sit down and your mind is going to stop, and you're going to be calm, and that you're going to transcend into some other state of mind. And that's not what it's about. If you're sitting still and you're breathing, and you know that you're breathing, and you're aware of what's happening, that's meditation. But see, I didn't really have any instructions. So, and then I ended up moving down here to Los Angeles, and when I started working here, there was a class that was being offered by a place called InsightLA here in
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, in Santa Monica. And so I took that class, which was the same class that you took, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction.
Wow, that's
so
amazing.
That was 11 years ago. I took that class. And that class, I started having a regular practice. And then I've just, over the years, practicing more and more, taking more classes. And then I was asked to teach. And so I took some teacher training, and I still continue to do that. In fact, I just came back today. Today's my first day back. I was just in Sedona doing the Mindful Self-Compassion teacher training.
Nice.
Which is a wonderful program.
Nice. Now, the class that I took of yours at UCLA, is that open to the public, or was that just by doctor? Because I'd like people to know about it if they live in LA and they could take it, because it is a wonderful 8-week course.
Well, that actually was for a research study.
Oh.
So, yeah. Sorry, my phone is ringing.
That's okay. Well, we know you're at UCLA right now doing work, so I appreciate your time, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, that was for a research study specifically for, the GI department, and that lasted, so that was for 3 years. Greg and I taught that class. Greg was my co-teacher. Mm-hmm. I think the group that I taught alone. You
taught alone, but we had a day on Saturday where there were two teachers, and I believe Greg was there.
Yeah, that are our half-day retreats. Yes, and so. But no, it's not open to the public. And I'm hoping, I believe that we are trying to have more wellness classes and things in our department. So I'm really hoping that will be in the future. But there is, so it's the class that you took, it's mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's an 8-week class, and I know InsightLA teaches it here in Santa Monica. And in your area, if anyone is interested, you could always Google that, and there's people that teach it all over the world.
Right.
So now also UCLA does have a center called the Mindful Awareness Research Center, and they do teach meditation classes. So if anybody's interested in learning how to do mindfulness meditation.
I didn't even know that. That's a wonderful resource. Yeah.
They can take introductory and intermediate classes there. Yeah, at UCLA.
And there's even free mindfulness trainings online. That Palouse, I think it's called. People can do that course for free if they wanted to.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guided meditations online too. Yeah, and I'm actually in the process of building a website for myself to have online meditations for people. So when I do see patients, I can tailor certain meditations for them and have them be able to download them and listen to them.
That's one. Yeah, you have I love the meditations. I'd always fall asleep though because your voice is very soothing and very calm. So what was the premise of the GI doctor sending many of us to that class? The idea is that IBS or some of these stomach disorders have a stress component in addition to a physiological component, and that if we could dial down our stress through these teachings, we could possibly dial down some of our GI symptoms. Is that how it works?
Yes. But I also I just want to clarify that. So it's not because people don't have these functional GI disorders because they're stressed. Okay. Like they didn't. I mean, yes, stress can exacerbate things, but just because someone's really stressed doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have a disorder.
Right.
Okay? I mean, yes, stress can turn on and off genes and things like that. But as we all know, once you have any kind of disorder, that can cause, more difficulties in your life, right? Because of symptoms, things like that.
I think it just makes everything worse.
Well, it decreases your quality of life, right? And so what happens is people tend to focus on those symptoms. And then what we do know is that once you focus on something and that becomes a little bit more stressful, right, then gets that negative feedback loop going, okay, in our HPA axis, which is the, hypothalamic pituitary axis, one of the stress responses. Okay, so we're focusing on that gets that going, makes our symptoms worse, then we get more stressed, and it keeps going like this. So there's been a lot of research done on this mindfulness-based stress reduction, and thousands of studies that they've found it to be helpful for many, many things. So one of the investigators here at our center wanted to try it out for irritable bowel syndrome. And so she wrote a grant and got funded. And so that's why we started. But yeah, so it can decrease anxiety, okay, because symptoms can cause a lot of anxiety. And it can just cause much more overall well-being because, first of all, you learn that you can manage your symptoms. And you're actually, the person is actually doing something themselves, right? So they're looking within themselves instead of asking someone else to help them, okay? It's great to go to the doctor, right? And if you need treatment to help your symptoms, but it's also very empowering to be able to do something on your own to calm your nervous system. And yeah, so people just report a greater feeling of wellness, less anxiety, less depression. And actually, one of the things that we do have some of the results back is, I'd say 75% reduction in symptoms.
Wow, that's amazing. And there's no side effects, whereas medication may help some people. There's often side effects and there's a cost. Once you learn these techniques, it's free.
Yeah, and the thing is you know, as a lot of people found out, it doesn't make your symptoms completely disappear. But what it does is it changes your relationship to your symptoms, right? They don't feel so unmanageable.
Yeah.
And you know that you can have a full life, even if you have some sort of symptoms.
Right. Yeah. That's great. So what else do you do? Because you're not teaching this class right now, I'm guessing. So you work at UCLA and with Dr. Mayer. So what other interesting things are you doing in this realm?
Yeah, well, I see patients with Dr. Meyer, and so I do teach them some mind-based things, and more of those informal practices that you were talking about. You know, that we were mentioning, that you can do at any time. You know, and I really talk to the people and find out, you know, and see, well, where are they getting stuck, and try to help them with things like that. Teaching deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, which also is something that calms actually the nervous system and activates your parasympathetic nervous system. And just some other mind-based therapies. I work with patients doing that. And then on the research side, I manage and run many of the research studies we have here.
Well, that sounds like fun, actually. Yeah. I'm really thankful for doctors like Dr. Mayer that believe that there's a connection. I mean, he just wrote a whole book on it, but so many doctors just would say that, no, there's absolutely no connection, you know. So I'm appreciative of your work, because I do believe that your brain is involved in just about everything you do.
Well, you know, and I actually think people and the medical community are really starting to see that and understand that. But what I would really like to happen is for the insurance companies to be able to cover these sorts of treatments.
Absolutely.
Because they are very helpful, and, you know, people have to pay out of their pocket for these kinds of things.
Yes.
I mean, I know Kaiser in Northern California actually offers this mindfulness-based stress reduction course, but I'm not aware that any of the Southern California places do.
I'm going to look into it, because I have a lot of friends that are Kaiser doctors. Yeah, well, because they're forward thinkers. I mean, Kaiser's one of the only medical facilities that I know of that are advocating plant-based diets for their patients with diabetes, because it's actually ending up saving them money. So I wouldn't be surprised that they are doing this. This should be something available to everybody, but it is. I mean, people can choose to learn this for free if they want. They don't have to take a class. So how would you recommend somebody get started? Buy a book, go to a meditation class?
Well, I would recommend someone to take an introductory class. Like I said, there's you can take them at InsightLA in Santa Monica, or at the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center to have basics of mindfulness. And I think it's really important to have some guidance in the beginning, because what's going to happen is things are going to come up, and people are going to say, I just can't do this, I can't sit still, right? And then things come up, and then you can ask the teacher questions, and then they can, you know, basically normalize the experience, because, you know, anybody who's teaching meditation has a long practice, and so many years of experience. So speaking from our own experience, we can help normalize and encourage, you know, to keep up with the practice, because it isn't easy to start a practice. No. And the other thing is it's really helpful to be in a group, because you're doing it together. You have the support of the group. And then there's some motivational factor, right? That you're, you know, kind of like you have homework, and you're going home to do and practice this, and then you're going to go back the next week, and you're going to build on that foundation, and you're going to keep building on that. And I think that's what I would recommend for someone who first wants to get started. Now, if someone really isn't into group things, there are things online. There actually are some, like I know the Mindful Awareness Research Center has a meditation class online.
Oh, neat.
So, yeah, so people around can do that. Or if you'd like, there are guided meditations on the internet. You can find them. And I recommend doing it at the same time because you get used to it, right? And you sit in the same place and trying basically the similar...
Bless you.
similar posture. Because, as we know, conditioned responses, right? Like when we lie down on our bed, our body knows it's time to go to sleep. Right. And so if we sit in an upright posture, in a chair or something in the same place around the same time, our body gets used to that. Mm-hmm. And then it settles in right away. It's a lot easier to calm down and just kind of drop into our inner world. The other thing I'd say is start off small. Mm-hmm. So don't say, I'm going to sit for an hour, right? Just start off with 5 minutes. Start off with 5 minutes and then, go up according to the comfort level. If you want to go up a minute a week or, but I would start small and also being kind to ourselves. I think that's one thing I like to add to the definition of mindfulness is, paying attention to our moment-by-moment experience, non-judgmentally, but with kindness, right? We really need to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. So when we think we're going to start our practice and we miss a day or something, that's okay, not to beat up on ourselves.
Yeah. I find that when I was sick a few weeks ago and I missed like 5 days, and I found it was so much harder to get back to it after missing.
Well, yeah, it's like an exercise routine.
Yeah, it was hard to get back to that, too.
and actually, that's the other point that I would love to make is, we spend time nourishing our bodies with good food. We spend time moving our bodies, right? And training our bodies. But we don't actually spend time training our brain.
Right. And I don't know why. And I know that for me and many of the people I work with, that's the hardest piece of the puzzle, the sitting still. And it's hard for me to convince people to do something that I still am not. It's not that I'm not convinced, but I make the same excuses. I'm too busy. I don't have time. It's too hard. Nothing's happening. How do you make a case for this? Diet you can almost make a case for, especially if somebody has, a lifestyle disease, high blood pressure, pre-diabetes. You can almost make a case why they need to change their diet. But how do you convince or make people aware that this is a really important tool to have in their toolbox when they say, I don't have time?
Well, there's a couple things. So you can point to the research. There's a lot of research out there that actually shows that it can lower blood pressure, and that it has helped people with psoriasis.
Wow, I did not know. That's interesting.
There's actually one study. It was done a long time ago with this. What they did is they had two groups of people. They had, a lot of people with psoriasis. They go into this UV light for treatment. Mm-hmm. This booth. So they had the two groups, and they both went in for the UV light. But the one group listened to a guided meditation while they were in there, and you know what? They healed 4 times more quick.
That's amazing. Do you think the meditation needs to be done once a day, twice a day, or does it matter? Is it a certain amount of numbers we're going for, like a certain amount of minutes per day?
I believe that there's changes in just 10 minutes a day.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe that that's what the research shows. So yeah. Obviously, the longer you sit, and I'm not saying to sit for 2 hours, but, I think 30 minutes is, 20 to 30 minutes is great if you can, but if you can only do, 10 minutes, then do 10 minutes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have a friend or several people I know that do this thing called Vipassana meditation, where like for 2 weeks, they just literally, that's all they do is meditate, and they're not allowed to talk. And I think I would literally go crazy. Why is silence so hard for so many of us and so uncomfortable? I'm not actually uncomfortable with it. And Well, for me it is. I mean, I tried to do this day of silence, and I thought I was going to go crazy because even though my mouth wasn't talking, my mind didn't shut up, and it was talking, and it was actually worse because I couldn't drown it out.
Well, and that's what we begin to notice, right? That's one of the things about meditation was we start to hear all of that chatter. We start to notice all of that chatter.
I hate it.
Yeah, but how we quiet the mind is by being still. Mm-hmm. Or some people, like I said, it's just do walking meditation. But yeah, so Vipassana is insight meditation. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's actually, it's basically mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, I've done many of those retreats. I go on one every year.
I don't know how, I don't even think I could be quiet for an hour. I mean, if I wasn't sleeping, and even sleeping, my husband says I talk in my sleep. So
you came to the half-day retreat.
Yeah, no, I did good. It was really great. I really enjoyed that. I really, really did. I really got a lot out of it. I feel whenever I took your class, I just felt so calm, and it was lovely, you know. It was just, and I do yoga, and I do feel a lot of what you're talking about when I do yoga. I do a kind of yoga. I don't do the hot, sweaty kind for exercise. I do either yin or restorative, where the poses are held, and it's more like of a that I think what you're trying to get me to understand or experience when I do yoga, I get it. That dialing down of, like, you know, in the brain not being so, you know, the monkey mind. Yeah.
And yoga is a form of meditation.
Yeah, that's
if you are being present with your body and the breath as you're moving, that's a form of meditation. Yeah. Not everybody has the same access point. Some things work better for other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always said, like, if I was, like, super rich and could retire, I would just go somewhere where literally I would just, because while meditation for hours scares me, but I could literally do yoga for hours, you know, and just because that's when I get that thing you're talking about the most. So, yeah, well, cool.
Well, have you tried to meditate after you do the yoga?
No, because my class is later in the day. That's that's interesting. Because I always thought that if you didn't meditate first thing in the morning, that I always was told that that's like the best time before you start doing stuff. So we try to do it. We get up about 6 or 6:30, and my husband and I meditate at 7:30 for about a half hour. And it's been now, I started practicing June 15th, 2015, so about a year and a half, and it still feels like I'm just sitting there. You know, I guess I'm waiting for, I don't know, God to show up or something, but I mean, it's just, I know that on days I meditate, I'm much less anxious, I'm more focused, I'm less bitchy, I'm more kind, because I can, even if others can't feel the difference in my energy, I know I feel different, and I can always tell, like, on days that I'm more impatient and judgmental, it's like, yeah, I should have meditated today. So it's never not worth it, and it's like, one of my friends who's a regular meditator said the best meditation is the one you'll actually do. So like you said, it doesn't matter where or for how long, I know that there's benefit. But like I said, for somebody that's been a vegan for 40 years that eats a near perfect diet, for somebody that's now been exercising for 5 years, it's still something, I don't want to say I struggle with it, but it's not like, if something's going to be let go of my day, that's the first thing I let go. You know, I don't ever have a day where I say, I'm just going to go to McDonald's. Or unless I'm physically sick, I never say, well, I'm just going to skip exercise. But on days where my husband's rushed, he goes, I don't have time today, I'm like, okay. You know, I wish I had the same, you know, like knowing how important it was as the other two things, because I do believe that it's like a three-legged stool to be healthy. And, you know, we talk about body, mind, and spirit. And unfortunately, allopathic Western medicine is all about the body. It's pretty much that it's almost like our body and our mind are two separate entities, except for doctors like Dr. Mayer and some of the other doctors. But I do believe it's body, mind, and spirit. It's not just diet. It's not just exercise. I do believe that mindful and meditation is like the third leg of a stool. And if you take one leg off a three-legged stool, it's going to fall over. And I think to be balanced, it's important. And that's why I wanted to interview you, so that maybe you could just reinforce with me how really important it is, and then hopefully inspire others to just try it. You know, try a class, read a book, do a free course or a paid course, whatever, but it does seem that in our society it's a little harder to convince people that this is actually in their best interest.
Yeah. Well, it's changed my life. It's opened me to my life, and my life is much fuller. And I just, I feel more connected to people. I am more connected to people because I'm more connected to myself. Yeah. And maybe remembering what you said. You said, when I meditate, I have a much smoother day.
I do.
And just maybe remembering that when you wake up in the morning, to get you to sit, and making these connections, like that. This is what helps me. This is what we have to do with any new habit that we have to start. Is remembering how good it makes us feel.
Yeah, exactly. I got to think about that, because I actually had something kind of negative, very negative happen today. And I think if I hadn't meditated, it would have been a lot worse. I mean, it still upset my stomach a little, and it's bothering me emotionally, but I know that it does. I think what it does, at least for me, Suzanne, is it creates a little bit of resilience. Yes. Because life is hard. Living in LA is hard. It's stressful. And I think it just gives you that little edge of protection, in life. To start your day. That's why I do think I've never been good at night meditation. When I try it at night, I fall asleep. But the morning, it just seems like it's just, instead, I don't drink coffee, but I think it's like it's just a good way to start your day.
Yeah, and and it's a practice.
Yeah.
It's a practice that we do, just like anything else, like exercise. And I'm glad you said the word resilience, because that's what I think too. Yeah. Physical exercises, that gives us resilience in our cardiovascular system and in our musculoskeletal system and many other things, our immune system. And actually meditation also gives resilience to our mind. And it also, it really helps our nervous system. And it does, like I said, give you that capacity. And so it does give you this flexibility and a lot of resilience.
Do you think that, it seems like I don't have kids, but the kids I know today, they're always, this is so funny, because when I was taking that class at UCLA, sometimes I would walk somewhere else on the campus because I knew somebody. And when I walked through UCLA campus, every single student, or maybe even teacher, but every person I encountered was looking at their phone. Nobody, people would literally bump into you because everybody was on this phone. And do you think that these devices have made a difference in our ability to not be able to focus and pay attention or even be mindful, or things like reality TV? It seems like everything in life now is pulling us away from being mindful.
I believe that, yes, that is true. I think there's a false sense of connectivity. Yes, you're connected, but I don't believe it's the kind of connected that we as biological human beings need.
Yeah, it's like everything's Facebook. I finally got off Facebook. I still keep a professional page for my work, but I have no friends. I have 0 friends because I couldn't take it anymore,
Yeah, and we are called human beings for a reason, but we're too much human doing instead of human being.
Yeah.
How nice is it to be with a friend, like just sitting here with you,
Yeah, sure.
We're sitting together. Yes, okay, we are connected to the internet. And believe me, technology has done wonderful things, but we can see each other and we respond that way, right? We respond through mirroring each other, through just being together. And there's something beautiful about being together and experiencing each other, experiencing through talking or, sharing things. And I don't think people do that as much anymore. I think people are emailing and texting. And,
oh, yeah.
And when you're walking down the street doing this, you're not noticing all kinds of beautiful things that you can be connected in a different way. Mm-hmm. I always say it was really interesting when to do a study when maybe in 10 years, take 20-year-olds then, that had been growing up with this technology since they were a baby, and then looking at people who didn't. I mean, obviously the brains will be different because of the age group, but I bet you the structure of the brain will be different.
Yeah. Well, the structure of the thumb will be different from all the texting. I just literally got an iPhone about 6 months ago, so it's crazy. It's just crazy.
Well, and that's why we need to take the time to connect with ourselves and just to be.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're sitting in a park, you can do this anywhere.
Yeah. It's almost like people are afraid to get connected to themselves and others. You know, I have a little dog, Bailey, sitting on my lap, and she's always in the present moment. She's always mindful. You know, she's never distracted. It's just, I think pets can teach us this. It's just a beautiful thing to just have them in our environment and observe them, because they seem so much connected to the earth and their body, unlike, people. I once heard a saying, and it's I have a sign in my back room, and it's a dog actually, and he's sleeping, and it says, "How beautiful it is to do nothing and then rest afterwards." And that's one of my favorite sayings. So, yeah. So what do you know about mindful eating? I don't know if you ever taught it, or is that part of the course? Or the reason I ask, I work with people that are food addicted, and it's not something that I've put into my program yet, but I've read some books on it, and I took a class, and we kind of sat there for like an hour to eat a raisin, and I think we did that in your class actually too. But so
I don't think it took quite an hour, but yeah,
it felt like an hour.
What do you remember about that?
Well, I remember that when you pay attention to food, it's a whole different experience than wolfing it down, and that I never noticed anything about a raisin, like that you could actually feel the little grooves in your tongue, and I never noticed how it changed. I really remember the exercise, how it actually changed flavors depending on what stage it was in the sitting in your mouth. I mean, yeah, it was actually kind of mind blowing now that I think about it, but because I'm guilty. I'm not a mindful eater. I eat fast. I do everything that I tell people to do. I don't always do. I don't really eat in the car, thank God. I stopped doing that. But sometimes the TV's on, and sometimes I'm distracted. And I know that's not good. And I'm sure for people that are struggling with weight, mindful eating could really help them, being aware of how much they're eating, because I think those satiety signals, if you're distracted, I think they still work, but I don't think you notice them as well.
Yeah. Well, so when you ate your breakfast this morning, do you remember all those textures and tastes like you did that raisin?
No, I mean, I do remember.
How long ago was that?
No, but I remember a little bit about it, but you're right. It's fun to just kind of just check in and just take one bite and just sit there and close your eyes and, yeah.
Well, you really enjoy, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
As you know, food is one of the beautiful gifts we have from this earth. And it nourishes us. It is one of our sources, our main source of nourishment. Okay? And how wonderful to be aware of that when we're eating. Because my understanding is, yes, it is about what you eat, but it's also about how you eat.
Yeah.
And if you're relaxed and enjoying, then your parasympathetic is, this rest and digest part of your nervous system is active. And you're actually going to digest the food better.
Sure.
You're setting up this environment, and you're giving off all sorts of things when you're enjoying this, the pleasure, the endorphins, and if you're really paying attention to what you eat, you're probably going to eat less of it, right? Because there comes a saturation point. You know how maybe you have an M&M and then you have another one, and after a while, it's just, they're not good anymore.
Right.
They're just, and so the slower you eat and the more you're paying attention to it, you get satisfied sooner, and you don't eat as much.
And I do notice that, because I'm slender now, but I was obese most of my life, and I notice that I still eat so much faster than my naturally slender husband, because you're right, when you eat slower, those satiety signals have a chance to register, and you will eat less. But again, it's all about paying attention. And I get back to what I said earlier, that I think people often don't want to pay attention. They're trying on purpose to numb out, because they don't want to feel their feelings, because they're so scared that they're going to be so sad or anxious or depressed that they'd rather use something like food or alcohol so that they don't have to feel their feelings. And that's why I'm afraid for some of these people, like the thought of just sitting there being mindful, it's like, well, that's the last thing they want to do is be aware of that. Because, you know, I don't know. I mean, I still think it's worth a shot, and I think it will help, like you say. Because, you know, I once heard one of the teachers say that it's better to eat McDonald's with a loving, grateful heart than kale with an angry heart. And well, I don't think it's ever really good to eat McDonald's, but I get that what they're saying is that, you know, when you are stressed, like, I mean, that's when a lot of people eat because of stress or overeat or eat the wrong food. But I find with me that at least now when I'm stressed, maybe because, you know, the funny thing is as much as I suffered with this IBS, I kind of look at it as a gift now, because it allowed me to learn so many things. First of all, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have taken that class. I wouldn't have had even more dietary perfection and excellence if I didn't go on this elimination diet that I had to. So while I was experiencing it, it wasn't like pleasant, but now I look at it as a gift because, you know, if I could live on sweet potatoes for 8.5 months while I was sick, it's like, well, I could pretty much go anywhere. I could go to, it doesn't, I mean, I don't, so it was kind of a cool thing, you know. But one of the things I noticed is that, you know, when I am stressed, I think that I'm a more sensitive person now because I feel what's going on in my gut more deeply. And I know that if I'm angry or stressed, well, that is not the time to be putting food in because it's not going to work the way it's supposed to. So I do need to calm down, whether that's going for a walk or just sitting still. So I learned a lot through having, through having the IBS and taking the class, and I'm much more aware of what's going on. And I think having that disease made me more aware because if you're, your stomach it's a big part of who you are. You know, you feel stuff in there, you know, your gut feelings and things like that. So it's all good. I find it just fascinating, and I totally recommend Dr. Mayer's book. I think it's a wonderfully written book, and it's a wonderful subject, and I'm just so fascinated by the gut-brain connection because I think it's not just the gut-brain connection. I think it's the every part of your body-brain connection. Yeah. 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 It must be,
so... Yeah, well, I just want to go back and comment on something like you were saying, well, a lot of people numb out, right? And yeah, that is because they're afraid and they don't want to face things. But as we know, in order to transform, we have to look at things, and it can be very painful. But what's the alternative?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is that how you want to live your life? You know, and some people they are too afraid and they don't make changes. But the thing is oftentimes the fear is much greater than the actuality. When you actually do face things, you know, we're all human. We all have difficulties in our lives. We're all going to, right? And so, like you said, by you facing the things and now that you have this awareness, you can choose a different pattern. You can go and take a walk before you decide to eat, right? And so this is how we see our patterns, is by paying attention to them.
Or take a bath. A bath is like the answer for everything. Well, not for everything, but I mean, you know, anytime you can create a pause, you know, so whether it's taking a warm bubble bath or tea is another great one. It's like I once had a senior citizen tell me, well, you know, when you're upset, well, just have some tea and see. And I use that a lot. I make myself a cup of hot tea, even if I don't drink it, because there's something in just, you know, not reacting right away, like you say, because I have always been a very reactive person. And where has that gotten me? In a lot of trouble, you know, making assumptions and then just firing back without knowing the. But again, I'm telling you, Suzanne, that story is now like part of me. And even though I'm not perfect and I still could have a bad day and yell at people, I've gotten so much better because that every time I see something, it's like, yeah, sometimes I don't like people, but I look at that story and I think, well, I don't know what happened to them in the past to make them be that way today. And I try much harder to give humans the benefit of the doubt because, you know, I would hope that they would give me, you know, because I don't always act appropriately and so, you know, that story is just the best story. I mean, there's never been a better story. So thank you. Best story ever. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't make it up. Yeah. But I actually think I think it's actually a true story. Yeah. And one of my meditation teachers I heard. But also, there's another teacher that I know always says waiting out the desire, what we were talking about earlier. You know, you said have tea, let's see.
Yeah.
Waiting out the desire. And I think if people are dealing with eating things, you know, when you want to reach for the chocolate, why don't you just take a pause, wait out that desire, or have tea or something, and then you see it was really about just reacting, right? You're grabbing at something, and maybe you really didn't need it. And then when you see that you can make a different choice, right? And sometimes these maladaptive patterns get changed by replacing it with something that actually works or that's beneficial for us, and then we start feeling better about ourselves, right? And then that keeps going.
Right. Yeah, this is it's just so interesting. But like you say, it's a practice and it's a process. And you know, it's like, I think somebody once said it's so easy to be a yogi at a mountaintop, but not so much at your mother-in-law's dinner table.
Yeah.
So.
But I think then again, you know, going back to that story and realizing, because what I try to remember is that we're all human.
Yep.
You know, and we all have joys and we all have sorrows.
She's not human. Not everybody except Bailey.
Now that's joy, right there.
That is joy. It really is. It really
is. And oftentimes one thing to remember is when we find people difficult, right? Mm-hmm. And to think, well, why are they difficult, right? They probably don't feel either safe, you know, or they don't feel loved, or they don't feel something. Mm-hmm. And if we can remember that we too feel like that sometimes, right. You know, and extend, you know, maybe a kind gesture. And sometimes just that alone, you know, they say that kindness kills. You know, kindness, exactly. It transforms people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend that, Jean-Pierre, and he's all about that and compassion, and he tells wonderful stories about just like literally I hate that word, but killing them with kindness and just being kind to people, even that aren't so kind to you, you know. What the best thing about meditation, though, is that Bailey sits on my lap or my husband's lap. It's like so cool because, you know, if she's on my lap, I can't get up until the timer dings. So she actually is helping us meditate. Well, it's just been such a pleasure talking to you, and this is just a subject that I hope people will be interested in just finding out more about and trying it, you know. They could just try it, you know, and there's no side effects. It's basically free or low cost, and it can change your life and everything. So thank you so much, Suzanne, and thanks all of you for watching another episode of Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious.